My greetings to you in Jesus' mighty name, amen. Today is Sunday, September 22, 2019, and this is the day the Lord has made for us. Amen. And let's rejoice in it, amen. My special welcome goes to our guests this morning. That is those who are attending Horizons Church for the first time. We welcome you all. Behind the chairs, there's a blue card. We call it communication card. You can give us your details as it requires. If you have any prayer requests, feel free to write the prayer requests. Even for us as old members of Horizons, we need you to write your prayer requests. Every Tuesday we meet to pray for individual requests. Otherwise, let's enjoy our Sunday worship service as we are going to be led by our praise and worship team. Can we give them a hand as we rise up to pray?
Praise God. You see, I'm up here by myself, so I want to hear everybody sing. So I don't like being by myself. So today we're going to talk about Sarah and Abraham. And today I started thinking about how we're a slave to so many things. We're a slave to our own belief in what God will do for us. We don't give Him time. We don't give Him the chance to answer our prayers. We say, okay, God, I want this, and then 5 minutes later, okay, you didn't answer me, so I'm going to do it myself. And we all know that it's a disaster every time. So it's so nice to just, when you pray, I'm sorry, it's really loud. When you pray, to think about what God wants for you, not what you want for you. Because we all want what we want, but what God wants is always best. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Sing that again. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. But I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My tears were drowned in perfect. You rescued me so I could stand and see. I am a child of God. You split the sea. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My tears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I can stand and free. I am a child of God. Sing it out. Oh, I am And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to call you Father, to call ourselves a child of God. Thank you for rescuing us from the slavery of sin. I pray that you would open our hearts to the message that we heard to hear today, Lord. Just take our praises as blessings from you.
Be seated. So we're getting ready to continue in our Forged in Fire series. Everybody excited? Yeah, it's been a good one. It's been good. We're glad that you're here today. A couple of things. We have been working on doing live translation to Spanish. If that's something that you want, you can call the number that's in your bulletin right now, and that will go ahead and get started with that. But also, we have, that goes along with this series, are bringing in home guides. Bringing in home guides are available in lots of different ways. They're available online and you can get them on your app. If you have the church app, you can get them at the desk over there. So we've got them available a lot of different ways. And you can take those, obviously, you want to get connected into life groups with those. So I want to make sure that you knew those things were available. So we'll get ready and we'll get started. So in our Forged in Fire series, the thing is, how many watched the show Forged in Fire? Yeah. Can you see that? Yeah, it's like good. There's like 3 of us here. I love that show. It's pretty cool when they're forging and the work that they do, because you see them just hammering out this steel. They start with, sometimes they have to cut up cars and stuff to use for the metal that they will forge, but then they have to get it into a block. Then they heat that block up and then they have to pound it. They have to get it into the shape that they want. Finally, when they get it into the shape, into their final shape, they do something called the clench. That clench is where they take it, usually they put it in oil, but it's something where they cool the steel and it hardens the steel. We have an opportunity next week for that same thing to happen. We're going to be potentially doing some baptisms. And if that's something that you have not had as a part of your life, you are interested in baptism, come talk to me after the service. Because that's just something that God takes when, it's not like we don't put you in the forge and get you all hot. But there is this power that God does when we make our stand with our faith in baptism. There is this strength that God brings to us through His Holy Spirit. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't done that, to be able to get baptized. But if you have your Bibles today, I want you to open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. That's where we're going to be starting there as we're looking at, we've looked at these couples in the Old Testament and their marriages. And we're really wanting their marriages to speak into our lives. So today we're going to look at a guy named Abram. God later changed his name to Abraham, and his wife Sarai, and later changed it to Sarah. So as you're turning in there, for those of you who aren't married yet, and if you don't have a Bible and would like one, just raise your hand. Our ushers can bring those to you. But if you're not married yet, while we're looking, I want to ask you, if you do want to get married today, now don't answer out loud, but what are the things that you have, what are some of your expectations? What do you want to get out of your marriage? For those of us who are married, you can rewind the clock. For some, that's a while. For some, that's not as far. To be able to rewind to those days beforehand and remember what you had for expectations for your marriage, for what it was going to be like as you went forward. Chances are pretty good your story went something like this, that you were massively in love with that person. You were just like, oh, this person. And when you saw him, actually, when you would even think of that, you just get that. That little, I don't know how she's going to translate that. You just get this feeling, right? The tingly winglies. You just get that, you think of it, it's like, you think about calling him or her, and it's like, ooh, you get that excitement, So it's this day you were in love, and you assume that after you got married, that those tingly winglies would follow you throughout your entire marriage. So you'd have this perfect life, and you'd have a perfect home. Maybe your perfect home includes a white picket fence and a dog, but not a cat. I'm sure you won't. I'm getting in trouble already, I can tell today. So chances are you'll maybe have a couple of kids, you have a career, maybe travel some. As you get older, you'll think that those tingly memories will be with you your entire life. That you want those there. So fast forward now, maybe 5 years into your marriage, 8 years, 12, 17, 29, 35 years into your marriage, down the road, and you ask the question, well, what is it that you expect from your marriage? And some are saying, I'm just trying to stay married. It's like trying to keep my kids out of jail, trying to keep my kids like if they've been spending a while, trying to keep my kids in college, just trying to figure out how to do jail college is very similar. Marriage. So sometimes you're in this and you get up saying, this is nothing like I thought it was going to be when we started. This is nothing like it is. So sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but rarely is it what you expected. So I look back 27 years when I first met Tammy. And our story together, our story is an amazing story. So we met in San Diego, California. Great place. It was awesome. Everything, you could just do everything in San Diego. You just get the beach. Within just a few miles, you have the mountains. Go over the mountains just a couple miles, you have the desert. And there's like all these. It's a great place. Other than all of the people and the politics and everything else, but it's a great place to live. So we got married and we moved to Denver. And we moved to Denver really quickly after we got married. So we were married a month. It's actually, I think Tammy went and started the week after we got back from our honeymoon. Was traveling to Denver to start her new job. So she'd just come back on the weekends. That was our first month of marriage. And so we moved to Denver, and then I got called to be a pastor. Kind of freaked me out a little bit. Kind of both of us. It's like, what is all this? And then Julia came along. That really freaked me out. And I was like, now I got to be a dad. What does that mean? So then become a pastor at this point. We moved to Michigan to work at the first church that I was a part of on staff. And then Josh came along. Then we got this call to go to Canada, to start a church in Canada. So we moved to Western Canada. Then after that, we went to Kansas. That was a big shift. Kansas. And then we went back to Michigan, and finally God's country that brought us here to Texas. Yep. So we're here. As I look back, some things are a lot better than what I had expected. But they're all very different from what I had expected at the very beginning. Now, many of you right now, you're going to look at your life and the things that are going on and think, nothing has gone as I planned. And some of you think that by this time, maybe you felt like you should be married. Or some of you are going to say, married, but I thought my marriage would be very different than it is right now. I believe that this story today, from Abraham and Sarah, no matter where you're at, is going to speak to you in a really deep, profound way. So Genesis chapter 12, we're going to start with verses 1 and 2. When God spoke to Abraham, here's what it says. The Lord said to Abraham, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I'll show you. Now, this is a huge promise that he makes to Abraham. And he says this. He says, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will become a blessing to others. So God says, leave everything that has made you comfortable in this life. And I want you to go to a place that you've never been before, and I want to take you there. Now, I believe God speaks to us, just like he did to Abram. I believe he still speaks to us today. He's speaking right now, and he's got this calling that he has for us. And I believe that as God's speaking to you, here's the challenge. Are you going to have the faith to follow what you hear him calling you to? That's the challenge. Will you have the faith to follow when he calls you to the unknown? So God's calling Abram to go to this place that he doesn't know anything about. And he didn't have Google or anything to go research it. That's the thing. And in a lot of our moves, especially in the recent years, I could look up everything about the city. You could go on Google Maps and travel to town. He didn't have that. He had camel travel. So he had this. And so you're going to leave things. When God calls, you're going to leave the things that seem the most comfortable to you. Because God's calling you to follow him into faith. Not necessarily a location, but into deeper faith. In fact, when you look in the New Testament, you see in Hebrews chapter 11 that he's talking about Abram and his wife and his life, which is characterized by faith. It says this, it's by faith that Abraham obeyed God when he called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as an inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. So, by faith, he followed God's voice. Now, can you imagine the conversation when he comes home to Sarah? He's like, hey, hon, God just talked to me, and we're going to move to to another place. I don't know where yet, but it's a ways. You know, you imagine she's like, so they're a young married couple, right? She's like, you're going to take me away from my family? Look, it's not me. God asked us to be able to. You know, can you imagine what that conversation would have been like? It's like all the challenges. Like, I know everybody here. I know, but God's calling us to go to this place. And He's telling us that He's going to bless us. Not only that, He's going to let the whole world know who He is through us. And I'm a little scared about that. But there's some excitement there too. And so, you know, they get up and they call U-Haul camel. You know, they get the double wide, they get the 2-hump camel. Oh, that's right, 2 men and a camel. And they get their stuff and they head out. And they're moving along. And they can't, you know, just look up like we can and pull up Zillow and find out, you know, what nice 3-bedroom place next to a lake with a good school district. You know, they don't know where they're going. So they head out on this journey. God will often call you into a life of blessing. Listen, He's calling you to a life of blessing. But the only road there is a life of faith. You have to step on that faith road in order to find this blessing in the midst. But chances are, if you're like me, you're going to say, God, no, wait a minute. I need a few more details here. I need to know some things about what's going to happen in this process. Because, you know, we like to know, we like to have things planned out. But God rarely gives us these details. This is the hard part. God rarely gives us those details because often we won't be able to handle them. We'll hear the details and think, you know, that might be too tough. And so I don't know that I can handle that. I don't want to know, so God doesn't tell us. That's one of the reasons He doesn't say. Because if we knew all that was going to happen, we might not go. We might just stay where we think we're safe. But really, that safety is an illusion. Because really, this life of faith, that's where the action's at. But also, God might be saying, I'm not going to give you the details, because if I did, it wouldn't take faith. You wouldn't have to trust me if you knew everything that was going to happen. Without faith, we're told in Scripture, it's impossible to please God. So Abram and Sarai get this promise. They're going to be a great nation. In other words, you're going to have lots of kids, grandkids. You're going to be massively blessed with descendants. But first, you have to go. You've got to go first. Now, what's interesting to me about their story is if you look at their marriage in the New Testament, they're characterized as a couple by faith. But if you look at their life in the Old Testament, and you look at the story that's behind it, and you look at the things that happened, their life wasn't always characterized by faith. This is what's cool when we dig into this. And that's because there's times where I waver in my faith, and reading their story encourages me. Because we see that their life was marked not by their failures or by the places where they were weak, but really by their faith that lasted. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to dig into this story. We're going to first see Abram, where he messes up in his faith, and then in his faith. Then we're going to look and see where Sarah messes up in her faith, and then we're going to look at a place where they mess up together in their faith. But we know the end. What typically happens when life doesn't go as planned, rather than being strengthened in our faith, a lot of us fall. A lot of us begin to bail in our faith when things don't go as we plan. We don't want to things to fall apart, but things happen. So we're going to look at 3 different ways in their marriage in particular that happened when their life didn't go as planned. So, generally, what happens when things don't go as planned, number 1, we can fall victim to fear.
That's the first.
That's the first thing. Number 1, we can fall victim to fear. And that's what happened to Abraham, when he was in a famine. There was a famine in the land. Basically, the economy tanked where he was at. There was nothing to sustain him, so they decided that they were going to move to Egypt. But he ran into some fear and made some decisions based on fear. So as Abram was about to enter Egypt, this is what he said to his wife Sarah. This is in verses 11 and 13. So Genesis 12, 11 and 13. As they were approaching the border of Egypt, Abram said to his wife Sarah, "Look, you're a really beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they'll say, 'This is his wife. Let's kill him so we can have her.' So, please tell them that you're my sister. Then they'll spare my life and treat me well because of their interest in you." Yeah, so this was a failure here on this part. Now, you might be going, what's going on? See, it's true, though. In this time, if you went into enemy territory and your wife was attractive, there was a high chance that they were going to kill you and take her, especially if they thought that they were stronger than you. which is why, if I lived back then, I would never go into enemy territory. Because my wife's so beautiful, I would be a dead man walking. Alright? So just won't go there. But what's interesting about this story is Abram forgot something. He forgot he'd been given a promise. And this promise was that he would be a father of many nations with Sarah. So last time I checked, biologically, you have to be alive to have kids. So he forgot about this promise. He got afraid. And so he was afraid that he was going to die. And he tells us in this moment, he started to doubt God's promise. He started to doubt him. So fear, because of this, he made a sinful decision. And he said, let's lie. And there was a lot of things that came after that. But because I really don't trust God to do what he said he's going to do. And sadly, we see this. I see this all the time. We see this in people's lives, don't we? So many people are afraid, taken off track, and they miss God's blessing because of fear. Fear can become such a dominant part of our lives. And I love the song that we sang. It says, I'm no longer a slave to fear. And we are slaves to fear when we let fear drive our decision making. And it can sneak in on us in a lot of different ways. Now, I know there's a lot of people today, we see it more and more in the statistics, that people are postponing marriage. They're not getting married. And they're not entering into this blessing that God has for us because they're afraid. They're afraid of different things. They're afraid, like, I don't know if this is going to be, will this marriage last? I don't know if they're going to cheat. I don't know if they're going to be a nag. I don't know if I can handle having kids. So rather than living by faith, live by fear. And rather than that, they suddenly find themselves, and we see this a lot in marriage. You know, is God calling us to tithe? But we can't tithe because we're struggling financially, so we don't obey. We're afraid. We're afraid that we won't have what it takes. Or we feel like God's calling us to be generous, but what if we lose our job? What if we find ourselves out of a job? Or we feel like God's calling us to be foster parents. But what if we bring this child into our house and the chemistry and what's going to happen to our kids and how will all of this work together? Or we feel like God is calling us maybe to stay at home and raise our kids, but what if we can't make it financially? Or God's calling us to start a new business. Maybe to start a ministry, or to get involved in a life group. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid to get involved. What if I don't connect? What if it won't work? What if? Instead of building each other up in our marriages, we start walking by fear of the what if. I can't tell you how many times in our marriage we've had to talk ourselves into faith rather than tearing ourselves down by the what if that could happen. It's crazy when you think about it. You know, when we moved to Canada just after 9/11. As a matter of fact, we took our kids to our first trip to Western Canada from Michigan 1 month exactly after 9/11, after the September 11th attacks. There's people saying, why would you fly with your kids? Well, that was probably the safest time to fly. You know, it was getting past all the guys with the M16s in the airports and stuff. That was the difficult one. But the reason we had the faith to go, this is what's interesting. The reason we had the faith to go on that big decision for us, to leave our country in the time of war, just after it breaks out with unknown and uncertainty, goes back to some decisions that we made early in our faith. And Tammy doesn't probably even know and understand some of the things. We were at a church, we had a fairly large church. This is before I was a pastor, before I was called to be a pastor. And we've been asked to teach a prayer group together at the church. And teach a study on prayer. That kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was afraid this whole thing was, she's like, oh no, we can, it's like, okay. That step, we encouraged one another. That small step of faith was an encouraging step that led us to make bigger steps of faith later on. So the likelihood that God is going to call you to become the leader of a nation is pretty small, like he did with Abraham. But he does have a call for you. That call is going to come in different ways. And what we need to do is, in those moments, those small moments where it does take some risk, we need to step out there so that we can be ready for that big one. I'm convinced that there are many people here who God has spoken to. Actually, I know God. I know that He's speaking to every single one of you. And He's got a call for you. That call might not be to be a pastor or a missionary or do these things that we tend to think of as big stuff that God calls us. But He is calling you to take a step of faith. in life. Right now, Dexter and Brittany Jones, Brittany's our office administrator, she's getting ready to transition out of that role because she's taking a step where they are going to go to Uganda and serve, not necessarily as missionaries. They're not sure how long God wants them to be there. They're not putting titles on it. They're following God's call. It's pretty scary, but it's amazing. As they took little steps, God's laid out bigger ones. But I can guarantee you, this is not the first call that God's placed on them. He starts by trusting and then giving us this blessing. And we step out into those small things, those small steps of faith that becomes bigger. In marriages, there's so much fear talk. What if, what if, what if? What if will tear you down rather than saying, God's spoken and God's leading us. And so I'm going to step out and obey those promises. But Abraham panicked. He panicked. God had already given him a promise. He said, I'm going to give you a legacy with family. And he's like, they're going to kill me. And so he panics and makes a fear decision. And he stopped believing the promise. So one, we can fall victim to fear. The second thing that often happens, and I bet you might see yourself here as I do too, is we get ahead of God. We get ahead of God. So if you know me at all, I'm a ready, fire, aim person. It's like, no, let's go. Wait a minute, so it's like, I know what this is like to get ahead of ourselves. But here's the thing, God is speaking to Abraham. God's told us we're going to have kids, but they aren't having kids. It's taking way too long. I'm sure the conversation, God, you're taking too long in this process. I can just imagine, that at the very beginning of this, that they were kind of thinking, okay, God's told us that we're going to have kids. They start picking out names. What are they going to call? I say they like getting the nursery ready. Where they're going to have a reveal party. There's all this stuff. They start kind of do all these things to get ready, but it's not happening. And so there's this natural desire. Well, God's told us this is going to happen. I'll just help God. Yeah, I'll just sort of start moving. I can put some things in place to be able to get this stuff going because God's timing. He hasn't told me timing. He just told me He's going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of this. This fix it. This fix it. That's what Sarai did. So Abraham messed up, and then his wife messes up. So in Genesis 16, you jump down to that now, verses 1 and 2. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him. So if you're supposed to have kids, not having kids, got to fix the problem. The Bible says, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord's prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. So we're going to pause here for a moment on this. Some of you guys might be thinking, wow, wait a minute. What was that? What verse? Let me look up that verse. What was this? You see that? It says, wow, that's kind of cool. It's like, no, this is not cool. This is not a good thing. This process is not good. So she says, go sleep with my maidservant, and then notice what she says here. Perhaps I can have children through her. What did she not say? She didn't say, God can do this. She didn't trust God for this process. God can bring about His promises, or we can try to do this. So I can take control and try to just make this happen. Because God's promised it, so I'm going to try to take control of it and get it and try to force it to go through here. Just as a tip, trying to force God into your time frame, rarely works well. It is almost always pretty messy. Because it's hard to wait. Isn't it? Is it just me? It's hard to wait. It's a difficult thing to do. And so she's thinking, okay, we'll get a hold of God. And you read the whole story, Abraham gave in and was with Hagar, and she had a son. And the thing is, now there's this competition. And there's a lot of jealousy, and there's hurt, and there's pain. There's fighting going on back and forth between each other. They're going after each other, and then finally, Hagar and their son Ishmael is kicked out of the thing. This is brutal. And the thing is the family of Ishmael we see has continual problems in the history of Israel with Israel. So those families are constantly fighting one another as they go forward. So things that they didn't even expect. But this happens so often. I can't tell you how many times we have this temptation to compromise. So someone who's wanting to get married, you see all their friends getting married, and they're just like, I just want to get married. And so they compromise. They don't wait for that godly person to come around. And they find someone that's there now when they know they should wait. And so they make that compromise. Instead of waiting on God's promise. This was difficult for us. So we see this in a lot of different ways in marriage also. So young couples want to have the financial blessings that they see from their parents. And so they want that now. Instead of realizing that it's been 20, 30 years for their parents that they're left with sort of thing, they want that now. They want the car, they want the house, they want the pool, they want the stuff, they want to travel, they want all these freedoms, and they haven't yet walked through enough. So they compromise, get into debt, and find themselves in difficulties now for the next 20 or 30 years because they were trying to get ahead of what God was wanting to do in their life early. You might see a woman who's married to a non-Christian guy, and she desperately wants him to know who Christ is. It's a great desire, isn't it? So she decides she's going to start telling him all the time about the things, how much he needs God, and bringing it in front of him and just pounding it down his throat and actually pushes him away rather than waiting on God. The list can go on in the different ways. Sometimes don't like your job, and so they panic. They hate my boss, so I'm quitting. But you don't have anything to replace it. Find yourself 6 months later in poverty, going, how come I'm in poverty? God's supposed to be taking care of me. You made a really bad decision a few months ago out of fear. And put yourself into this place. You panic. You try to get ahead of God, which is common and dangerous. Here's what we have to remember. God's rarely early, but he's never late. Now, he also is on a whole different time scale than us. You know, the space-time continuum thing, he's not in our universe. So a lot of times, we panic. His time is perfect. It's perfect. But for us, we're like, God, what are you doing? And so we feel like we have to force it. We have to get him to move. And waiting on God is not passive. It's not passive. So it's not just like, okay, I'm going to wait for God, I'm not going to do anything. One of my favorite verses is from Isaiah 40. And it says, they that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will rise up on wings with eagles. They will walk and not be weary. They will run and not faint. So there's flying, there's running, and walking. All mentioned as part of our process. So we're still moving forward while we're waiting. What does that look like? I don't know. It probably depends on the circumstances. But waiting is not passive. But it is not easy. Waiting on God can be the most active, faith-filled living ever. It's a little bit like a waiter or a waitress. So a waiter or a waitress, what do? They serve others. And they wait. They serve them. So that's what it is for us. We need to be waiting on God. We need to be aggressively serving God while we're waiting, believing that what He has told us will come to pass. Even when we're faithless, though, He's faithful. It's a great promise. But Sarah panics. It's not coming down the way she wants, so she gets ahead of God. Things don't go as planned. It's so easy to start making decisions based on things. So easy to do that. So it's easy to get ahead of God. If you're taking notes, the third thing is we don't believe God will do it for us. We don't believe that God will do it for us. We simply don't believe it. He might answer other people's prayers, but I'm not sure that He's going to do it for me. I just don't know that He's going to do it. Quite honestly, I can understand why Abraham and Sarah started to feel this way about this promise. I mean, it took a long time for this to happen. So 30 years after the promise is when they saw it. Think about this. You're going to have kids, you know, you got the nursery, and they're like waiting that first year, and then the second year, and then the 5th year, and then the 15th year, and then the 20th year, and still this isn't happening. So, it would be easy to lose faith for all of us. It's interesting that Abraham and Sarah both did. So in Genesis 17, God comes to them. This is 30 years later after the promise. And it says specifically, I'm going to give you a song. Here's what it says. Then Abraham bowed his head to the ground, but he laughed at himself in disbelief. How could I become a father at the age of 100, he thought? And how can Sarah have a baby when she's 90 years old? In other words, this is centuries before Viagra, right? I mean, he's an old guy. He's like, hey, my body's not working like it should. Are you kidding me? And Sarah is no spring chicken either. We got these challenges. He's like, I can't believe this is going to happen. I would have believed it maybe 15 years ago. But now, at 100? Interesting, Sarah responded the exact same way. She overheard God talking in verse 12 of Genesis 18. Here's what the Bible says. So she laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is so old? She's being pretty sarcastic here. So God responds to this. The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Verse 14, God asked this question that must have pierced their souls. Must have pierced it. And God says this. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I can't prove this, but I believe at that moment it was something that shifted in their faith. And when we began to see this, I think at this moment they felt there was things that was too hard for the Lord. He had promised it never happened, and he comes back to remind them, oh, that's right. I can trust. Is there anything too hard for the Lord? And at that moment, their unbelief, all their manipulation, all their fear was just gone. We can take God at His word. I know a lot of people want to have children. I've known a lot of people who wanted to have children and conceive. I just wanted to acknowledge that as a painful thing. It's painful. There. But I also know there are people that are giving up on their faith. And I would just say, do you really think anything is too hard for God? Do you really think that there is anything too hard for the Lord? You might say, we're in a financial mess. I don't know how we can climb out of this. This is so difficult for me to be able to see where's the end. Do you think anything is too hard for God? Is your finances too hard? Is your relationship? Are things just too bad that God can't do? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? You say, you know what? You don't know really just what's really going on in our marriage. I mean, this person will never be godly. I'm telling you, they're mean, they're distant. Do you really not believe in a moment that God could bring the full power that He used to create the universe down to draw them back to Him? Is anything too big for God? We might be like our kids, they're never going to get it right. I just don't understand. It's so hard for them. God's grace, are you saying that God's grace, that the hound of heaven would not pursue them to the ends of the earth? Is anything too big for God? Sometimes we're saying we're always going to be miserable. Things are never going to get better. We're never going to have that something special. Is that how big your God is? Have you really stopped believing that it's possible? We get to this place where we want to really trust. Do we trust God not just to save our soul from hell, but to give us life here? Remember, He said, I want to give you life, and I want you to have it to the full. Is there anything too hard for the Lord? I want you to remember these words. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain. And now, I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. I'm redeemed.
Seems like all I could see was the struggle, haunted by ghosts that live in my past. wipe away every stain. I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. All my life I have been called unworthy. In my voice of my shame and regret. But when I hear you whisper, child, lift up your head, I remember, oh God, you're not done with me yet. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain. I'm not who I used to be, because I don't have to be the person that I used to be. That day is long and gone, because I've got a new name, a new life. I'm not the same. Hope that will carry me home. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain. I'm not who I used to be. Oh God, I'm not who I used to be. Jesus, I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. Thank God redeemed.
So what now? We're going to take a pause. If you'd like to sit, you can for just a moment. But for those of you that have a marriage, and if you're honest, it's not what you want it to be. If there's one piece of common advice that we can walk through with this entire series, it's this, right here. Invite God into the center of your marriage. Invite Him into the center of your heart. That's really this whole series summarized in one sense. Invite Him in. Don't play church. Don't act Christian. Don't act religious. Don't insult God that way. Invite Him in. So you want to join hands and say, God, we've been distracted, we've been divided, and we are not where we want to be. But we are redeemed. And we're wanting to put you, Father, as the center of our marriage, of our relationship, of our family, of our hearts. When you do that, buckle your seatbelt. God's going to begin to move. And when life doesn't turn out as you plan, especially when it doesn't turn out as you plan, you embrace Christ. Embrace Him. You don't need all of the things that you want. You need Christ. We get distracted by so many things. He is enough. Christ is enough. And whenever your faith starts to falter, and it's easy for that to happen, whenever that does, it's good news. Even in your faithlessness, for Abraham and Sarah, they had times where they were faithless. I've had times where I've been faithless. But we serve a God who is never faithless. You can trust Him. He is faithful, even when we mess up. Romans 4:19 and 21 says this about Abraham. And Abraham's faith did not weaken. Something happened with that transition. Abraham's faith didn't weaken. Even though at about 100 years of age, he figured his body was as good as dead, so was Sarah's womb. See, there's a difference between fact and truth. There's a big difference between fact and truth. The fact is he was 100 years old. Sarah was 90. That was a fact. But there's a truth. God gave a promise. And God fulfilled His promise. Truth trumps facts. Truth always prevails. Verse 20. Abraham never wavered in believing God's promise. In fact, his faith grew stronger. And in this he brought glory to God. He was fully convinced that God is able to do whatever He promised. It took 100 years. Don't waver in your faith. Be strengthened in it. If things don't go as planned, Proverbs 19:21 says, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. His purpose will prevail. Don't waver in your faith. Here's the great news, even if you do, He's there. He's still there, and He's faithful. And why would we want to embrace anything short of His fullness for us, of His best for us? He leads you, though, not into a place of comfort, but into a place of unknown, where we're stretched, especially when it comes to this idea of marriage. He stretches us. If you place Him at the very center of your life, and at the center of your covenant union in your marriage, watch as He leads you out of your comfort zone and into the place of blessing, as only He can do. Might not be your timing, but remember, He's never late. What's great is we can also borrow on the faith of others. We have become isolated from each other in this time of technology and connection, with using our phones and Instagram and all these things. And we find we're more distant than ever from each other. We see that our kids are in more trouble with their emotions. We see more depression, more challenges that are faced. In this time of incredible communications, we're more and more isolated. Bring God to the center. And sometimes that will mean we'll need to borrow on the faith of friends. And this is why we talk about getting in groups. Not because we want to populate groups. We want to bring strength of this body into your life. And that's why we need each other. We need to learn to depend on one another. Because we want Him, as we move into this place where He takes us out of our comfort zone, we need sometimes the strength of other people. Let's pray. God, thank you for what you're saying to us today. And I believe and I ask, God, that you will work miracles. Work miracles in our marriages. Work miracles in our relationships. Work miracles in our families. Work miracles in our bodies. And today, Lord, as we're focused on your faithfulness, I just want to pray that you will drive out fear. So I want to say in this moment, if you have been making decisions by fear, I want to give you a moment to be able to come up and say, I am redeemed. I'm no longer going to be a slave to fear. And so if that's you, if you feel like that you've been maybe moving in fear for a little bit, talking yourself out of doing what God has maybe called you to, I want you to do this. Maybe just, I'm going to ask you to do something courageous. I want to ask you to come up to the front. And if fear has been something that's driven you, making poor decisions, maybe there's just circumstances in your life where you're afraid. Maybe you know God's call, and you're afraid to take that step. If you have the courage, I want to be able to pray for you today. And we'll come forward, and we'll pray that God will remove this fear with His spirit of love and power and sound mind. So if that's you today, why don't you come forward? It could be in your marriage, it could be in your personal life, it could be in your finances, it could be in any of these areas. But if that's you, I'm just going to ask you to come forward. Don't be afraid. Just going to wait just a moment.
These guys playing the background, they drop up the music. Everybody lay down. Got in trouble for that a couple weeks ago.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Spirit, which brings us hope and freedom and faith. God, I thank you for the courage that these people came up here. You know the circumstances that surround their lives. You know the overwhelmed vision of their future that they're holding. But Father, I pray that you will come now and help this truth that you want to give them life and give it to the full. That blessing, Father, will come and fall upon them. I pray that you'll speak to them in this moment. Help it make clear the steps that you're wanting them to take. And so, Father, I pray that through the power of your Holy Spirit, through the love that Christ had for us when he died on the cross, that shed blood that gave us that forgiveness of sins, I pray that in this moment, Father, that you will come and flow through them. Fill them with hope, with the promise, your promise for them. As they have clarity on their next steps, Father, I pray that as you move, that they will begin to rest and trust in you alone. Father, thank you that we are redeemed. Ask you to bring you blessing and touch and strength. In Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Praise God. I want everyone to stand up. Our God is unstoppable. Do we believe that today? Yes. All right. Let's have some worship. Heaven thundered and the world was born. Life begins and ends in the dust you born. They commanded and the mountains move. Fear is losing ground, our hope is you. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Freedom conquered, all our chains undone. Sin defeated, Jesus is overcome. Mercy triumphed when the third day comes. Darkness was ignited and the stone was gone. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Again. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable.
there for a second. I said I got too into the song there for a second and I forgot to preach.
Thank you, Pastor Jesse, for your powerful word. I just thought of summarizing his message in one sentence. Faith rules, because nothing is too hard for God. Amen? We need to take some offering. I need to share with you. As we always say, giving is part of worshiping God. Paul encourages the church of Corinth in 1 Corinthians 16. I'll read verse 1 and 2. Hope you'll be listening attentively, because I'm not going to explain. Now, regarding your question about the money being collected for God's people in Jerusalem, you should follow the same procedure I gave in the churches in Galatia. On the first day of each week, you should put aside a portion of money you have earned. Don't wait until I am there. I need it collected once. Thank you. God bless you. Our ushers will pass on the buckets or baskets for offerings as I say some announcements. Our announcement, which is number 1, we have a family worship night. This is coming Sunday, September 29, from 6 to 7 at Lions Park Club. We're inviting all of you, bring in some desserts or snacks, and during the hour and a half, it will be time for us to share our testimonies. So those with testimonies, it's also a good time to come and share your testimonies. We are also going to have single parent oil change outreach. I know we have single parents here. We need to change oil for your cars. This is going to happen on the 19th of October, on a Saturday. You need to sign up for that. When you sign up, you will be giving us details of your car, your model, and whatever. That will allow us to get the accessories which are fit for your car. This can be opened up if our single parents here are fewer. We can open up this kind of event to outsiders. So you can also speak to other single parents out there and make them to sign up. Then concession stand, we need about 6 people to sign up. This is the Colon High School. Please sign up at the welcome desk for you to volunteer to serve. My always last announcement and plea to you, I'm really begging you, those who have not signed up for a life group, please kindly do so. Thank you so much. As we continue to ponder over the word forged in fire, the series for the families, for the marriages. Let's remember Horizons is the church. Can we finish that? Thank you so much. God bless you.
Perfect. Well done, sir. Thank you.